Hey, if this seems rushed, that's because it is no time to waste. So, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about this book called Powernomics, really fast. Fast, that's subjective. So, Powernomics is a declared Black American national economic empowerment plan in a book that politically and economically conceptualizes economic self-sufficiency and competitiveness. Its framework is positioned to target how Black people could be engaged in the production and distribution of wealth and goods by understanding how behavioral conduct, monopolies, and racism converge to exploit Black people in part one of the book. In part two, it discusses the need to build competitive communities and how schools can be likewise restructured for group competitiveness. Part three goes into greater detail about how to practice group economics, engage in the development of industries and industrialization, the practice of group politics, and how might the Black church continue to expand their established role in group economics via financial planning, like offering that kind of training in workshops, or entrepreneurial development training. So these are my book notes. That's what I'm reading to you, and I'll explain if it is deemed necessary. I think I'll read you something towards the end from the book itself, just to kind of close this out. But other than that, just kind of listen to the notes and what I have to explain about it. So one thing that he mentioned that I took notes on was focus on scale and not cross-lateral networking. I was writing word for word what he was saying. Your only connection to the divine is money in your pocket and capital. And you think God hates you when you're low. Wake up, folks. Is grifting and not contributing things. And grifting is a term, I forgot who coined it, but I'll put the book in the description because I remember reading it last year and I was like, but it was talking about how people will shift their opinion on things for money in politics, like, and access for power, i.e. grifting and not contributing. So he was saying that poverty isn't indicative of your personhood or merit or lack of value. It's systemic. And we have to think that we really think that having a healthy life is completely in our hands, and poverty is constructed, it's man-made. And we've developed systems that make shame and guilt in not paying bills on time and having debt. And so I think a lot of this beginning part of the book, he was talking about the systematic social engineering of behavioral patterns in Black people that happens politically, intellectually, and in social monopolies. What I was talking about earlier, the shame and guilt and not being able to pay your bills on time or having debts, some of that could have been and was developed during times where they were developing and executing Black codes and redlining, all to make sure there was a monopoly control on land, economic systems, and government that did not include Black people because, again, the United States wasn't formed and built for Black people, if you know what I mean. It was formed to exploit them. So, not to exploit them, but because it exploited them, words. So, another thing that he points out is how the Constitution codified and used legal language to deny reparation and preferences, and made itself color specific to allocate rights and resources and power to a majority right society. That's the beginning of the Constitution, especially once you have the whole American Revolution thing. So what he talks about is how the wealth gap kind of stems from that. So like I said, there's monopolies. Constitution makes things color specific to allocate rights and resources, like liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's not for you, Black people. And so that's what he's getting at the beginning of the book, is like just a reminder. And so from that, he discusses media monopolies, the power and wealth in information control in telephone and broadcast. And another thing he kind of talks about, like beyond monopolies, is integration. He talks about integration a lot and ethno aggregation, and all to kind of get at the way that nobody really wants to propose black solutions for black problems. Society's more comfortable recommending broad minority solutions for problems that are actually unique to black people alone. And I think one great example that he had offered there that I'm thinking off the top of my head is like there was a lot of need for scholarships and resources that you kind of see labeled as a broad need for minorities to have versus black people. So, and like of course he was talking about there is the need and opportunity to create those services and grants and everything for black people, not for black people, for minorities. But a lot of times, more often than not, it just becomes blanket and doesn't necessarily help black people that well at all. And I think that's what you saw in the DEI conversations, while a lot of black men, black women, black men, black people lost their jobs to the antagonization or demonization of DEI. There was also a lot of white people that affected because, again, minority started to include more than just black, but ethnicity, gender, and likewise. So he talks a lot about how integration took away the sense of community in this book, like moving from the disservice that happens when there is recommendations for policies and support for various resources that that don't necessarily help black people but continue to make black people vulnerable to others in this passive consumer market. And so he was just talking about how with integration we were kind of forced to choose either assimilating or segregating. And he kind of just reminds how people have a choice. And one quote that I pulled from the book, it was like, Black Americans are locked in a caste system, which the nation's class system rests. And so it's just something to think about, because I think he talks about horizontal movement, meaning economic competition, like crabs in a barrel type of thing that happens within the system for black people. And then he talks about this, there was so much focus on like, let's be able to drink out the same water fountain type of thing, that there wasn't a lot of vertical progress. There wasn't a redistribution of ownership and control of wealth and power resources. The horizontal social integration, it financially weakened and shut out a lot of black businesses actually. So this book is rich with content like that, just talking about that horizontal and vertical competition. But also, one thing I thought was really interesting and just what I pulled from the book overall was taking time to understand that financial literacy is more than savings and investments. It's knowing that this economy and the way it's set up really doesn't serve anyone. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of things that are like, create just as more, if not as much as you consume. I think this book pointed out something that I didn't really consider until this book, but how much we're told to, no, that's not true. I did consider this before, but because we're told so much to like go after the job, get the career, do this, that, and the third, kind of feed into the cogs in the machine in these loops. And we're never really told how we can create jobs, how we can use our education to start our own businesses, how we might compete, not just kind of cycle in. Like, how do we rebuild industries that combine vocational and academic training? How do we take part in redistributing wealth? And businesses and being a part of businesses can redistribute wealth faster than employment is what the book is talking about. Because you start creating wealth, and then you also likewise help service the community as well. So another thing I thought was really interesting, like on that vein, was he was talking about the main issue being not a main issue, but one issue is being not just it's not the lack of jobs, it's the economic structure and dependence. And there's not always like seeking to like get ahead of the curve versus following it. Like, for example, you see a lot of people hopping on the AI trends, AI grants, AI this, AI that. If cyberspace fails, when it fails, it's like, what kind of alternative economy would you have been a part of crafting that isn't completely just dependent on that? And so I thought that even that was really, really interesting, because he's talking about like being able to start to not just like have an economy that just gives back to you, but an economy that's reciprocal. And so, and I don't know if I want to go into that too much, but I think what I will say about having a more reciprocal economy, there's so much that the economy already takes from Black people, whether it's labor, resources, or just wealth hoarding that happens. So I think I'm also thinking about like the way that we have room to demand more from that which we're a part of, the systems and structures, blase blase. He definitely has a book that could delve into that more called Black Labor, White Wealth, that you can check out. But he was talking about like ways that you might engage with business. You don't need to own and operate every type of business. You don't need to have you see how the elite are really blinded by high-tech information. He said it in his book in 2001 in publishing. It's still true today. There's an obsession. And we have room to industrialize around consumer spending patterns. You don't need what if you don't need to scale? Think about that. What if you just create the business in a circle? Okay. Let's see. He talks about a lot of different things that you can look into, industries. He talks about looking at book distribution, radio and film distribution. And I think what's really interesting is like there's someone in the book had said, I can't remember if he quoted it or if he just said it. I'm gonna say he quoted somebody that was talking about like, y'all can march and demonstrate and beg. We play to win. Like in terms of economic competitiveness, like the politics term, and he gets into this a little bit middle of the book, it's borrowed from the French word politique. It originally emerged to address the struggle to control and increase spoils of power and wealth produced by Black slavery, or the institution of slavery that largely enslaved Black people. So earlier he asked, how do we rebuild industries? And one thing he talked about was I'm trying to find my note on it, but converting social issues into economic instead of political goals, becoming a job producer instead of a job seeker. And I think that's all I'll say about that, to be honest, because what has politics done for Black people lately? Of course, it can help with like group, the altruistic, like everybody eats type of conversations, right? Of course, great. He just kind of talks about how Black people historically have had a determined and misdirected compassion, like helping everybody, but never really being helped. And that reminds me of like the women's movement in the U.S. Like I think like I'll be seeing some people like, and I understand reclaiming terms and stuff, but I think I'll see people like be like feminists, and it's just like they weren't originally for you. Like none of, like historically, the movement wasn't for you. Weren't seen as a woman for real. Next, so one thing that he talks about moving into, looking into Black public policy research institutions, legal theories and policies for reparation. And he also talks about restitution has been used by nearly every group that has claimed injury except Black people. And the civil rights movement was redirected from Black people to everybody. Reparations need not to be hijacked by any poor superficial scholarship to derail the economic justice of Black Americans. And one thing I wrote in my notes, and I'll post this and I'll probably put the link below to my Substack on it, but this book really made me think long and hard about how many times policy and organizations and institutions have made people of color out of programming that originally solicited and took care of Black people. Integration and altruism has subverted care in our communities for other communities, for minority coalition building. And just like other people do, we should also see the fruit of the labor of our ancestors. And that was a quote from the book. And I thought it was really, really dope that he was talking about like things like boycotts work, but to follow them up with actions that have tangible goals. Like these economic like divestments, they work, but tangible goals. What's next? What are we moving towards? Which I think is really, really critical. It reminds me of a conversation I had that I will not go into. And I'm gonna just wrap this up with something I wrote. Have you ever been told that you need to grow up? Have you ever wanted to say it or you said it? That's what this book was. When you're a child, you eat differently in every sense. And they talk about this in the Bible too. You're soothed by different things, be that games or food or what's on TV. In the Bible, they're talking about like you were on milk. You were being spiritually fed milk. And in my words, I said you're spoon-fed histories, and maybe you're trained in how you're not really trained in how you might create your own or be a part of your own. And this book really makes you reflect on yourself and your habits, because you're not a child anymore, even though you are a child. And at the same time, I know like you have your inner child, but maybe you're like an actual adult. That's what I'm talking about. You're not a child anymore. Like your body is different. You've hit puberty, you've passed it. Okay? You're closer to menopause than you are puberty. Just kidding. But this book just reminded me how much people are taking what your body needs and they'll give you supplements. Okay, he wrote this at a time of economic prosperity, rapid technological changes, and people, we still don't own and control a sufficient amount of anything. And what defines your opportunity here is what you own and control typically. And he talks about how we make everyone rich on this earth. So this country denied education, free to labor, land, they fought in every war ever. And this country owes you. Clarice says, I'm not my ancestors, my great. They're you. You're them. This country owes you. Peace. Okay, bye, for real.